Has Ginger been a good chaperone today?
Ginger has been great. She laughs at us when we talk.
What would you have done if they started kissing?
They wouldn't have. I would just I don't know. I'd think of something.
We're like sitting in the car and we're like, I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
Oh, it's great.
And then like, Jana, John David, what's up with y'all? You know, you're not holding hands.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is so hot in Minnesota, so hot. I have been so behind today. What a day, what a day. So when it's not 100 million degrees here in Minnesota, a lot of times I spend researching and finding out information for you guys so that I can deliver all kinds of tea. We haven't talked about Ginger and Jeremy in a minute. We were doing a lot about them leading up to everything that happened with Josh because they were on the heels of launching a book. And then in the middle of that, the poor people, oh, I felt so terrible. Their book launched on May 4th. Josh was arrested on April 28th, and their entire book launch has been completely overshadowed. I did read the book. I have a copy of it right here. It's a pretty easy read, you guys. It's nothing earth-shattering. It's pretty basic. They've been on this like prolonged media blitz, and I'll give them credit. Like, they are hustling. They are trying to move copies of the book. It's, again, the book itself has some never before seen photos in it. You see a glimpse into their lives through the book. There's stuff about their courtship that they hadn't disclosed in the past. There's photos that we haven't seen in the past before. And just stuff about their life. One of the biggest takeaways that I felt was in this book was that Jeremy had to go through like 6 months of intense conversations with Jinger Duggar about whether or not he was going to be the one for Ginger. And it all stemmed down to their belief in salvation. And they fought about that extensively. Now, they are in California, and Jeremy is part of a church through John MacArthur that is a little bit different than what Ginger grew up in, but it has their own problems in their own right. Throughout everything, the one thing I've noticed about Ginger is that critical thinking was not taught to these girls. In fact, they were taught to be helpmeets, and they were taught to be the caregivers of their families and their husbands. And because of that, when things get tough and when things feel out of control, instead of actually seeking help with resources like a therapist or a doctor or even talking to a friend, most of these girls end up turning to the Bible. They go to the Bible, they go to their parents read them verses. She speaks openly in her book about her struggle with anxiety and eating disorder, being afraid of the dark, waking up in the middle of the night. Knowing what Josh Duggar did and knowing that she woke up in the middle of the night kind of makes you feel a little bit sad, to be honest. She does not spend a whole lot of time talking about Josh, and she actually doesn't really say much of anything other than publicly identifying herself as one of his victims and really saying that she was over the situation, and it was really hard when everything was released back in 2015 because it was like ripping off an old wound that had healed. Now, I don't know if that's actually true. In their mind, they might have felt like they had forgiven him, and they might have felt like they were, might have felt like they'd forgiven him, or might have felt like they were on a right path, or they were, he was redeemed. But at the end of the day, that's her story, that's her word. And when the times are tough, she goes to her faith, and that's the hope. So when she's feeling uncertain, she just remembers that she loves God. Now, in an interview that she did with Fox News, it's interesting because at no place in this interview did they really talk very much about Josh. In fact, at the very beginning of it, they only talk about how they had issued a joint statement which says, We are disturbed to hear of the charges against Josh. While the case must go through the legal system, we want to make clear that we absolutely condemn any form of CA and fully support the authorities and judicial process in the pursuit of justice. So when they sat down with Fox, I was like, okay, Fox is going to use this opportunity to actually ask them about the situation, but they didn't. Instead, they asked them about the book. So one of the things that they asked Jinger was, how does faith help you cope with tough times? And I think this is the closest we get any sort of reaction or any sort of public acknowledgement from her in an indirect way about what she's experiencing. She says, it's definitely a foundation of my life. Whatever circumstances I'm going through, I filter through God's word. When I've walked through the loss of my grandmother, who I love dearly at that moment when I got the call from my mom, that's just how I handled that. It was so tough, but I knew that God was in control. He had taken my grandma home to be with him, and knowing that brought me peace. In her eyes, it's a loss, but to her, she feels like that's what her grandmother wanted, so it's a win. And maybe there is peace to that. I don't know. But then she expanded on that and talked about her miscarriage. She said, I miscarried a baby. It was really, really tough. But in those moments, I see that God carries me through, and that is when the rubber really meets the road. You see, it's not just talking about God and having this understanding from the Bible that's on paper. You need to know it's real. You need to feel and see the reality of Christ's love. He gives us love in those difficult circumstances, even if we don't see it at the moment, but it's there. I have hope because of Christ. Even with my circumstances, when the world turned upside down, everything seemingly out of control, there is such peace in my heart. So her world is completely flipped upside down right now, and everything is 100% out of control, and she says that she has peace in her heart. Now, I have to be honest here. I feel really sad. I feel sad that I have no doubt that she has great faith. I have no doubt that she believes in God. But I also feel sad that there seems to be this lack of ability to dig deep, to really feel emotions, because Jinger grew up in a cult where she wasn't taught to have emotions. She was only taught to be happy. She was only taught to have a joyful spirit, to keep a sweet disposition, to be humble, to be meek, to be happy. So when things get bad, we don't hear about that. And this is the aspect of the Duggars that I really wish, and this cult, would just stop. I wish we would actually hear the pain. I wish we would hear the reality that not everything in life is perfect, that there is sadness, that sometimes it's not just about God. Sometimes it's not just about having faith, that you actually have to do things to help yourself feel better, that you have to take steps to do things to feel better beyond just going to the Bible. The Duggars really did a disservice to their girls. They didn't teach them education that would help them in the world. They didn't give them critical thinking skills. They didn't tell their daughters that they could do anything more than being a wife, a mother, and a homemaker. They didn't tell their daughters or push their daughters to have an education beyond high school. They didn't do anything to ensure that their daughters would have the ability to discern critical or complex emotions about real life situations, that not everything should be peaceful. In fact, I know Jinger has spoken openly about how she feels like everybody is scrutinizing every single word. She feels like she has to be careful with what she says because people are going to be critical of her. Today, I'm not feeling critical of her. Today, I'm feeling empathetic for her. Today, I'm feeling much like I felt yesterday for Anna. There's a lot here that tells me that these girls emotionally are not mature. There's so much in them where I see the reactions are not consistent with the magnitude of what's going on. Now, she may not want to share how she's feeling, and she does not have to share how she's feeling. But the problem is that in this book, every time she went to her parents as a child, they minimized things. They told her to pray. When she struggled with an eating disorder, instead of getting her help, her mother made her stick to a diet, wrote out her recipes, and read her Bible passages. When she struggled to sleep at night, probably because what Josh was doing was happening at night, Jim Bob wrote down scripture for her to pray on and meditate on. At no time have they worked through these deep-seated emotional wounds, and that has stunted their development and their growth. And that is a problem with the IBLP, and it's a problem with this cult. Don't think critically. Don't analyze information around you. Don't question what's happening, because everything is God's will. And sometimes it's not God's will. Sometimes in the Bible, they talk about free will. And in the Bible that I read and I listened to growing up, listen, I might be an atheist today, but I know the Bible well enough to know that God didn't just give you a Bible and say, this is all you need. No, God gave you free will to make your own choices, to live your own life, and to just know that He's there. He gives doctors to help with medical issues. He gives psychologists to help you if you're having struggles with your feelings and emotions. He gives you medication if there's chemical imbalances. I wish these fundamentalists would stop looking at science as the enemy, because there's Christians out there that can embrace both science and faith. I think of, in particular, one person that I know specifically who's actually an accomplished doctor. I don't want to share his name because I don't want you guys harassing him, but he was someone that was very important to our lives when my son was an infant. And even though he had all of these accomplishments, even though he had board certifications in 3 separate specialties, making him one of the most decorated doctors at the hospital we went to, he still had a deep faith in God and this understanding that not everything can be explained by science, and sometimes there's mysteries that happen. And if scientists can understand that not everything has an explanation, the fundamentalists could stop rejecting science and saying that science disproves the Bible. What if science actually proved the Bible? What if science actually showed that the Bible and the science could work together? Do they have to live polar opposite of one another? I don't care if you believe. I really don't. You should. What I do care about is when kids like Jinger are brought up in a world where they don't get to believe in science, where they don't get to have emotions, and when things that are bad to them happen, they can't even express their feelings. I hope for the sake of Jinger that at some point in her life she can get the help that she needs. Unfortunately, I know that won't happen as long as she and Jeremy remain at the church that they're at, and as long as she remains with Jeremy, who does not believe in psychology or medication. So while we've always cheered on Jinger, in fact, Jinger and Jeremy, they have a long way to go. And if they really want to get to healing, letting go of these very tight controls and these legalistic rules might help them both thrive. I wish them the best. I truly hope she finds a way through this and can actually find some peace that's not superficial and that will allow her to dig in to those emotions and that trauma she's experienced so that she can heal. All right, you guys, tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye.